Well, it being 12 o'clock, I've called the meeting of December 16th, 2024 to order. And I will do a roll call. Those here first. Mark.
Present.
Scott. Here. Peter.
Present.
Lee. Present. Dan here. Linda.
Here.
And Emily.
Here.
And I thought, and there's Aaron.
Here.
Great, thank you guys. Let's see, we have the December, thanks to Shannon and Lee, we have the December 2nd, 2024 minutes to approve. Shannon sent out some comments from Lee that I thought were good and good catches. Does anyone else have any thing that they want to add?
Motion to approve the minutes as amended in the email that was sent by Shannon earlier today.
Scott, was that a second or just a wait? I was waiting. It can be a second. Let's see, here's John. John, did you have any, not to put you on the spot, right, you're walking in, did you have any comments on the December 2nd?
I thought the comments were excellent. I support them both.
Okay.
Logged on the Zoom too.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you. Did you have any comments on the minutes of December 2nd?
No, I did not.
Great, thank you. Okay, then all those in favor, and I think I need to do this by a roll call vote again. Mark?
I'll abstain, I wasn't present.
Okay, Scott? Yes.
And
John?
sorry about that.
You?
Yeah.
Peter?
Aye.
Lee? Aye. Dan? Aye. Linda?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
And Aaron, keep on moving around my screen. Aaron?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Can we assign chair for this meeting?
Yes, thank you. We did it last time. Anybody dying to?
I'm actually really good at it, so yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Shannon did such a good job with the draft.
And she's gonna even be better now because she's not sitting next to me and she actually has access to the computer, so. Okay. So item 3 and item 4 is sort of, I think they could probably be merged. Not, right, that's okay with Megan, I can add something if necessary, but we did have a meeting. It was a relatively brief meeting. And I think you probably, when I was looking at this morning for the updates, it was pretty much everything in your camp anyway. You okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think my main update is we are gonna be sending out the request for proposals today under the state contract. We have 7 vendors selected that we're gonna be sending it to. They are, if you'd like me to tell you who they are.
Yes.
And if there's feedback on this, we're going to be sending it to Agency, Dream Collaborative, Nelson Nygaard, RKG, Stantec, Utile, and VHB. These are all firms that do similar work that are on our state contract and able to connect with directly, and it's fine.
You might repeat that one more time.
Yeah, Agency, Dream Collaborative, Nelson Nygaard, RKG, Stantec, Utile, and VHB. The only change from the RFP that was approved 2 weeks ago is just a little bit of a time shift. I have to push back the deadline 1 week. So the proposals will be due on January 27th. I also don't have a tour scheduled at this point, so I put in to be determined on that, but once we find out who's interested, we can schedule a tour with those parties and coordinate them.
So it's a select group, it's not like an open public to anybody, right? Or how does this work with this solicitation?
Yeah, my understanding is that we can send it to firms on this list, so these are the ones that,
Okay, but it's not open to anybody else outside of it, right?
I don't know. the answer to
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so when you use the state contract, and first of all, when I have a conversation with the applicant, RFP, because it's, I don't think you need to do. That is just sending out a scope of service, and you probably can move that date way up, especially with the short timeline that you have to spend that money. So because it's a state contract event, you don't have to do an RFP.
Okay.
All right, so you can just select the vendor, you do a scope of services, you send it out to the various vendors, you ask them to give you their price proposal based on the scope of work that you, that you've established, and then you select the lowest bidder. That's how it goes. So it's not,
You're obligated to take the lowest bidder.
you are obligated to take the lowest bidder. Yeah. Yeah, so it's not
lowest qualified.
lowest qualified bidder, yeah.
It's a little bit, I mean, there's a lot, you probably saw the RFP, there's a lot of different scopes to it, and there's gonna be different interpretations about the level of effort. So someone could put in, what they think is a level of effort versus someone else, how do we sort of vet between?
Well, that should be under scope of services as far as the level of effort, that level of effort that we want them to do. Meaning the town of Concord wants them to do. So you set the parameters as far as what you're looking for them to do.
Yeah,
And if they fall short, then that's somebody that we could rule out because they didn't meet the scope of services.
So the assessment will be done essentially based on their quality and the depth of their response to that scope of
As
service.
long as it complies with the scope of services that you set, if they meet that requirement, all of them, then you select the lowest.
because in the RFP, we had evaluation criteria, and it wasn't just, it sounds like it's just about numbers, but we had a lot of other extra things, in the RFP, Megan, right? For
Yeah.
evaluation criteria,
So when we do an RFP, normally it's because there isn't a state contracted vendor out there. So we want to go through a process where we want a scope of services, and it's not necessarily, when I'm here, here's a quotation about the price at this point. We just want a qualified person. But with your short timeline, to me, it would be best to just send out the scope of services, ask them for their quotes back. You sit and evaluate them, if they all meet the scope of services, then it's the lowest price. And you can make that go faster instead of waiting until January 27th.
Right, yeah, that, I wanted clarification on that, so we could just change the date to like, January 10th or something like that.
State contractor vendor, yep, it's sound business practice.
And do we do that, we have to do that as we're sending it out, or we can do it once it's on the street?
No, you should set it out with an expectation that we're looking for a response and quotes by a certain date.
Okay, sorry, Lee.
Just for the board's consideration, I don't disagree with what's being said about being on the state bid list, but this isn't a paving contract where they're all doing the same thing. This is very particular, and just again, for the board's consideration, do we really want to evaluate what the criteria, the responses and how they meet the criteria we've set out? And is a week gonna make them, maybe we could just move it up anyway, but.
I think it's a really important question. I don't, top of my head, I don't, because it seems to me that evaluation is gonna have to happen. We've done the work, we have that criteria to apply. What concerns me is it may not be apparent in their response. And so it's gonna be, I think to your point, there's gonna be this back and forth. Just to give them a chance to respond to a question. I assume we're gonna have multiple questions or questions with multiple vendors.
So your two options are going to be, you do a request for proposal, and then you can evaluate them, and then you not necessarily select somebody based on price, lowest price. You can select based on the scope of services if they meet the requirements that you set forward. Or you just select a vendor off the state contract, like I said, you send out your scope of services, they send it back. To me, it all depends on your timing. I think you have a chunk of money that the legislature had given you and you have a deadline to spend it, so. You know, it's a choice, but it's a faster choice going the other route.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, it's just.
And I'm sorry, I'm Anthony Ansel, I'm the town CFO for those who
Thank
don't know.
I think sometimes in these instances, slow is fast, but fast is slow, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned about going to state contract and getting away from what we were trying to vet these consultants based on our criteria that we came up with, and it's gonna be apples and oranges with the numbers. And if it's, we were talking about having an interview, which may not be, we might not have time for that, but the RFP was really laid out what we wanted for this consultant. I just went by numbers, I'm just worried about that.
Yeah. Mark,
So I've looked at state contracts in the past. And they tend to be for fairly specific services. And we've spent some time generating an RFP document that says what we want done. And I think the question is, how well does the services that are specified in state terms and conditions match up to what we're actually looking to do? Because if there's not a pretty clean match against that, then the concern that's being raised here is a valid one. It's not going to be that easy to get at, is this vendor really prepared to do the kinds of things that we're needing them to do?
Right.
So I think that the idea of looking into that contract and seeing is, if this, it really doesn't match up very well, then I think actually asking for proposals and write-ups and giving them an opportunity to have meetings with those vendors to understand what they're thinking when they responded is pretty appropriate, because otherwise we could get 4 or 6 weeks down the road and discover that what we just signed off on isn't anywhere near what they were planning to give.
right, I'm also concerned about John's,
Yeah.
it's a big focus of this effort, and I think you'd want a chance to know who this person is and can they communicate to you.
Yeah.
Start with it.
I think this is an example of price may not be the most important factor in making a selection.
Right.
So do we,
Sometimes it is, but
would it make sense to pick a set of individuals that, you know, a subset of this group to say, these are the people who are gonna take a look at these responses when they come in and prioritize them for our,
We have, yes,
Yeah.
I mean, one of our last items is a discussion about
okay,
the process, but yes, I think the
Yeah.
short answer is yes. So, first, I appreciate you making us, educating us on that's an option, and it's something we clearly want to consider.
Yeah, it's just a choice.
Yeah.
So, and if you wanna go the RFP route, that's fine. I'm not sure about the January 27th date, because it has to allow my staff to be able to write that, post that, and all the required places in the central register and combines and et cetera, so it may go beyond January 27th.
so we're actually more interested in like a hybrid, sending the RFP to the 7 people on the scope.
my understanding is if you're already on the state bid list, you don't have to comply with all the formalities of like a 30B RFP, which is what we're doing by sending it to the 7.
As
But
long as there's a good match for the services that we're trying to do, but
Right.
you know,
I can look
only
at
3
these.
out of the 5 sections are covered by that state contract, and we're still kind of in a gray area around the other 2 areas.
Does that list of 7 include everybody that you kind of experts in this area feel should be?
I mean, there's others. That's why I was asking the question, Megan, and other.
others that are not on the state bid list.
So who are some of the ones that you would like to see on there that are not?
I was just thinking like Sasaki or something like that.
I think you can also send it to wherever you want.
Look, I don't know the process, so, I wasn't sure if they're public. When you were saying, Megan, that, the RFP was ready to go out today, you're talking about the ones you.
Yeah, you know, I think we
talking
have a little bit of,
Or the ones.
well, I think there's been a little bit of a disconnect. I think, so I think Anthony's outlining, I guess it's not able to go out today. And he's outlining that if we were gonna move forward, we need to do a request for quotes on the state bid list. Or we could move forward with a request for proposals if that is the, will of the
I
board.
don't know where this is news to me. I thought you were gonna go, our RFP was going on. Being reviewed and going out this week.
Yeah, I was hoping that would be the case. I hadn't gotten it reviewed by our procurement team yet. And so, the timeline is so critical. I thought we were able to move forward and it sounds like we could do a request for proposals or we could do a request for quotes using the state bid list. I think what is not possible, like I said, about doing a request for proposals for the folks on the bid list.
You're not getting it out today, we still have to comply with Mass General Law.
I just don't think going out for quotes for what this.
Yeah, understood.
This is pretty broad.
So you wanna move forward with the request proposals as
My
drafted?
opinion.
Yeah.
Just do we have any idea of what that would do to our, when we could release it?
So I think that we could probably get it out, 10 days, week to 10 days.
Including holidays?
I don't,
It stretches to the 10 days because of the holidays, but yeah, I think that we could probably get the RFP.
I'm just curious. I assumed this was gonna be done a week or two ago. As we were talking about, and now it's being delayed another 10 days.
Yeah, that was my assumption. I thought.
So I don't know, this whole thing is all news to me about going, so.
So could we, I'm sorry to interrupt, Scott, I'm just saying, could we just take what we've got? Send it to the 7 firms on the state bid list? I know at least, the majority of them are qualified to respond to us. We may miss out on, Sasaki, but I think we probably don't have enough money in the budget for that.
No, I just came up with your name. I wasn't sure if there's other people,
But it sounds like, I'm a little confused, the RFQ versus the RFP, the RFQ is what says they submit a qualifying bid, we go with the lowest bidder. RFP gives us discretion to interview and assess, right? In terms of the content that we're putting out to these guys. So I think what you're saying is RFQ is hard because we don't necessarily want to go with the low bidder, right? There are qualitative aspects that we're looking to be satisfied. Is it that hard to take what we've already prepared and just kind of put RFP across the top as opposed to RFQ? Why does it take extra time?
We have to do the required postings, so we have to post by law in certain areas, so we have to allow for that time to happen.
But if we limit who we send it to the people who are on the state bid, we don't have to, and we can get it out the door.
So if you do it on the state bid list, you're giving them a scope of services, they're sending you back a price proposal for that scope of services, and then you select the lowest.
The lowest qualified bidder, and it's up to us to look at it and go through the qualifications, which would be one way of winnowing down and eliminating firms that we don't think have the qualification.
I'm.
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking through.
Yes and no, you can't use the RFP to use off a state bid, that's all. So, you gotta be careful about why you're ruling somebody out, because if you give them a scope of services and they say, we're gonna do everything, you can't say, well, this company hasn't been in business as long as, RFK or RKG, you can't do that, so.
But you could say that it doesn't look like they've got people with deep experience in doing fiscal impact analysis as part of the team, therefore we don't want them.
Well, then you probably want to do an RFP.
That's what I'm hearing. Elizabeth? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm with Scott. We always talked about doing an RFP. This RFQ thing seems to be coming up because the town didn't get the information to get this done in time, which I don't think we should be blamed for or be forced into doing an RFQ for. So I would be for the RFP, which is, I think, what we all agreed on originally.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought we were on
as quick as
RFP.
possible,
Okay.
and even, as quick as we can, for you.
I appreciate that. And Scott, you've made the point too before that, given where we are, and assigning responsibility is less important to me personally, but, given where we are on the calendar. I think we're not gonna get a lot of focus anyway, so we may as well use that time to straddle the holidays and.
It's a good point.
And then,
Yeah, I agree. I'd rather just,
all right, does anyone else want anything else to say about it, or should we, do we need a vote on that, or just say? Anthony?
No, I think what we need to be clear about is that the direction is to do an RFP. That's been the direction and continues to be the direction.
And when do we think that'll go out, and we're gonna keep the due date, the 27th of January?
We heard, 10 days.
We'll give you a better timeline.
But I like the idea of keeping the same response deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
27th.
Yeah, I'm not sure, we might be able to cut that date, the duration down from 30 days to something shorter, I think we can do that, so if we only wanna give companies 15 days, it's just, when you worry about somebody that says, geez, this person's not here, you don't get a proposal from them, so that's, you know. But we might be able to do that and still make that January 27th deadline, but I'll have my procurement manager wasn't interested,
Yeah.
so
Sorry,
yeah, you've seen our RFP, right?
in an email.
Okay.
Have I read it? No.
So we don't know if it needs to be.
No, but we'll go through it as quick as we can.
yeah, and I'm sort of similar building on that, based on your experience, Anthony, I'm curious, we keep the 27th date, let's say we can magically. Get through our process pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Are there, once we've made the decision to go to the RFP, are there certain time constraints or processes that mandate that the decision, the final this decision and negotiations will not be completed any sooner than, or is that, are we on our, do we control that process?
Well, you know, we still have to get an evaluation committee with the procurement manager that would sit and evaluate the responses to make sure to see what was.
Internal to the town?
Yeah, in terms of the town, and then we have to get a contract from them and have double check the contract, so it just adds a little bit more time to it, but. We can rush it as quick as humanly possible.
Okay, I'm curious, so we got a procurement manager, how big is that procurement team, and
She's one person and she also does the middle school building, so it's almost like part-time, you know, she's doing two jobs.
so when you say the team, there's one.
There's just one person. And it's
Procurement manager, yeah.
50% of our time, yeah. It's a challenge right now, it's a challenge that we struggle throughout the organization, but we have a plan to fix that.
Is it, I don't know if anyone thinks this would be worthwhile, but is it possible that we could meet that person and share some of the things that we're focused on?
Yeah,
I think
when's the
that would
next meeting?
expedite it, or-
For the 27th, so they can.
People think that's worthwhile?
Or if you wanna create a small subgroup and then meet,
Yeah,
and then I'm happy to help facilitate that, and we can get that ball rolling.
I'm just thinking if there's any way we can be more efficient, know what the hurdles are that you guys have to deal with and try to work within that.
Sure, we can set that up there.
Okay.
But I mean, you have what was approved by this group.
Yeah.
So that's not gonna hold anything up.
So she has seen the material we prepared, right? You know,
You said
It was sent around.
it was sent to her, so
so she's presumably, because I do think having half an hour just for some members of this committee to talk to her. This is our once in a generation opportunity. We want to make sure she understands the nuances and kind of the real value we're looking to get from whoever we partner with. And so it would be helpful for her to have a direct conversation with us.
It's a great point, and what I, at the risk of getting ahead of myself, I just conceptually, it seems to me we'd have a representative from each one of the subcommittees. But just a thought. Linda, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wondered at the same time if we could get a subgroup or a group to work with DCAM to create a list of potential vendors that we would consider, rather than get to our next meeting or the meeting after that, then have that question crop up of who's it going out to. I'm not qualified to do that, but I'm sure there are those of you who are.
That's a
It
great.
would be publicly posted. If the RFP would be posted, it
Which is-
can go out directly to people, of course, but, it would be available for all
That's
vendors.
central register.
Yeah,
The
yes.
central register, okay.
Yes. But we can also send it to others that we would be looking for them to, directly.
But Linda, I think you're suggesting that DCAM may be aware of certain vendors who are very well suited for this, so we should at least get their thoughts on.
I have,
We might want to prod.
my list includes their thoughts. That's
Okay.
been done, yeah.
Okay, great. Lee?
Thank you.
The point of the state bid list is that all those vendors are pre-qualified as compared to just sending out a solicitation to the world and let anybody respond to it. So I just,
Yeah, we could be shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of our timeline by deviating from the approved scope, the approved vendor list. I mean, most of these firms I'm looking at can do the job.
Yeah.
And time is, well, we've been saying time is of the essence. So I'm just a little iffy on it.
I think my greatest concern, my personal greatest concern is it's just that, the RFP allows us to do a deeper dive into the selection process. And I think that there's so many nuances. I mean, people work really hard on that RFP, that there's a limitation just in terms of words. And there's nothing like, as John suggested, 30 minutes with somebody. Anyway, sorry.
I just want to add, as someone who's gone through these sorts of things, not to muddy the water, but this allowance, if you enter into a contract, you have to demonstrate you have money for the contract. And this allowance that you're talking about, the 350, is, needs to be spent by June 30th, right? I know I've heard windows of review and a project schedule is much greater than just 6 months or even less. I just put that out there because, knowing that if you don't have money that's allocated, you can't enter into services after June 30th.
Yes.
But as the information to add on to Alan's, so that also should be in the scope of services, that this has to be completed, it is in there by
Isn't it?
completely 100% by that date.
No, it's a great point. Yeah, and we're gonna have a conversation shortly about the budget, finalizing what the numbers should be. There's a little bit of difference of opinions among the department to make that advisory. Happy to do so. Okay, Megan, anything else you want to bring to our attention?
No, the second piece is just the draft budget, the board's consideration.
Before you do that, then I think with one thing that I remember that I'm. It had to do with communications to outs from this committee, from us and DCAM and to the press and other things, and we were going to we were gonna try to speak. Do our best to speak with one voice, and I'm kind of looking at John thinking that maybe the stuff should come from you and your organization, but. Was that what we decided, or we did decide on you were gonna do that? Remember the conversation?
I do, yes, maybe together, coordination.
Okay.
I think it came from, occasionally a few different people will get questions from the press about status updates, and so we just. Usually if I get a question, I connect with, Dan or Dan Patrick as chairs, but as, public facing subcommittee, it might make sense to also make sure you're in the loop. And-
That'd be great,
Yeah,
man. These guys obviously are qualified and more current than anybody. But it would be helpful. So for
Yeah.
example, we agreed that, the correspondence is gonna be posted once a month. But should Shannon get something that is time sensitive, she's gonna direct it to us to be sure that we can respond, right? So if we can be helpful, for sure.
Okay, all right, do you wanna shift into the budget?
Sure. So I believe you received in your packet last week a draft budget. For a while, 725 seems like such a high number to spend, and then pretty quickly it doesn't. So what you have in front of you includes 350,000 for the MCI Advisory Board's consulting for planning, economic, and market analysis. My understanding is that this number was vetted through the subcommittee, so hopefully this is not a surprise to see this number as a component of this budget. And the second area of this budget includes, oh, sure.
Well, are you going to visit each one of the line items? You want to do an overall summary and then hit?
Yeah, I was gonna put them in like 3 different buckets.
Perfect.
So first is for the planning, second is for wastewater treatment plant analysis. And I think it's been discussed here with the select board that this is really the critical component of this effort here. Nothing really works without making sure that this system is going, we know as much about the system as possible, so that it can both support development at this site and beyond. So there's a number of items here that have been included from our Public Works Director, Alan Cathcart, who's here, that have a lot of analysis around this piece. And some of these funds have been spent, and some of them are, everything is critical, I will say. And the third piece is also in the Concord Public Works area, but it's also something that is a big goal of the select board and the town, which is trying to come up with a plan for a few of our critical land use needs in town, which include public safety and public works. So I presented a white paper at our last meeting, kind of formally sharing that the town is interested in considering a portion of the area as something to think about for public works. And to be able to have a firmer conversation and to think about what that would mean for the footprint and what that would mean for, impact around the wastewater treatment plant, for example, we have proposed to use some of this funding to do a further concept plan and analysis for that. And so, as I said, we have Alan here to answer any specific wastewater treatment questions. But mostly, I guess I think it'd be helpful if there is a vote for the MCI advisory board 350,000 component as that is. I want to make sure you're all comfortable with that. That's what we're planning to. This is what we're planning to present to the select board tonight. If you're comfortable with that line item.
So, thank you. That's a great. One because our doing themselves. I know Aaron had sent an email around suggesting or expressing some concerns about the amount of that. Aaron, do you want to explain your concern?
Yeah, I mean, I guess since I'm fairly familiar with these groups and I work in the industry, that it felt a little like low to me, that overall number, and I guess we just don't know yet given the scope. And so my question is if the RFPs all come in higher than that number, what's our path forward?
And to Alan's point, we either get it right, or we don't, we miss an opportunity, and then there is the issue about going into next year.
I think whatever the budget number is, whether it's 350 or a different number, the RFP should say not to exceed that number.
Makes sense.
And then the respondents will include their scope accordingly.
Right.
So I don't work in the industry and I had the same reaction as Aaron. I thought it was surprisingly low for the scope of services and the duration, 6 months of effectively 5-6 months of work.
Yeah, and it's not just planning services, it's economic services, it's communication services. So it's a pretty broad scope of work.
It is.
With different consultants.
Yep. And it's, in some respects, to Anthony's point, we're going, and other people have said it, Alan just said it, we have to figure out a way to get there. Do that, to make that happen, and usually that requires effort. For often, here.
When we were talking this through in the land use subcommittee, we sort of went 400 to 300, and then we sort of chose the middle route. Maybe we should push it up to 400. Yeah.
Emily?
Yes, so within each line item, is there an allocation for contingency, right? I mean, like, is there a chance that we've over budgeted for the wastewater treatment plant line items? Typically in a budget, we'd have some room to move some funds around based on where the final costs land.
I'll take that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works. So we sat down, we worked with a consultant and already initiated work over in that site, as I mentioned, resulting in a facility assessment of the treatment plan. We worked with them on a broad range of wastewater services in the past. So knowing from our meeting a couple weeks ago that there was a risk of not necessarily identifying real projects to be done before June 30th, I circled back with them. We had a meeting last week to kind of, auger into these details a little bit. Each one of them I could prioritize, but I think order of magnitude, they're pretty close. And, this is all, as we kind of say, building the plane on the fly, we know that. And this is a situation where it just was on the news last night. We can't let, perfection get in the way of good enough. And right now, these are good numbers on the wastewater side that are really important because, I can walk you through what they are. It's helpful very quickly. If you just read it and you understand it, that's great too. But it's not a lot of money on the wastewater. And some of these things are, the $80,000 is to do a very detailed assessment of the former sand beds over on that campus. So that's important because we're trying to be creative with the wastewater capacity and possibly even expand it. Without that information, it's just, a thought. And it's kind of hard to plan around these when we don't nail these, we got to nail certain parameters down. So that was intended to try and allow this group, as well as the town, to understand, is there potential for more than what is, present, just the potential. So that's a good number to use because it's desktop work and some field work that's pretty well defined. The wastewater treatment system conditions demand assessment. We don't know what the existing infrastructure for wastewater is over there. DCAM doesn't have that information. That's going to be an integral part of whatever we take over. So we're trying to say upfront, can we characterize and do the inspections of the pipe? We know linear feet, we know ballpark costs, what it costs to do CCTV inspections and see what the condition is. What are we getting into? There's also a demand component. What are the existing customers of that facility, including the power station, which is an important contributor right now, but whether that's there or not in the future, we want to understand that. Again, it's all to try and understand what demands are existing, so they kind of weigh into what's the potential for redevelopment on campus and off campus. And then there's another component here, which is the metering in West Concord and the connection of West Concord to that facility. In order for that to work for the town, we want to characterize what are those contributions and the infrastructure that's accessory to the treatment facility. How do we get from West Concord sewer area to MCI? And this would allow us to start looking at the design and layout and probable cost estimates, because all of these things are going to weigh into what's the cost for the town to take this over. It's just better information for the town to make a decision moving forward. So those are, in essence, the concept that you see here, and the money per
concept, just curious, the
Yeah.
last one, conceptual plan for CPW facility.
So I'm gonna go to that one now. So the first.
Before we do,
Yeah,
I just want to get clarity. Emily asked a question about whether or not contingencies are, am I correct to assume based on your description, of what you just shared with us, that whatever contingencies you needed are baked into those numbers?
yeah, there's a contingency and we can plus or minus. What I want to make sure is that if we have to reduce the scope, it might just reduce the certainty of the value, right? This is plus or minus 25% versus 10%.
All right, great, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's on the way.
I'm assuming this budget that we're discussing, these are not like hard and fast in each item. So I'm assuming the 725 can kind of flow from one bucket to another if necessary. And if it's able to happen.
Yes, I think, Chris, are you on here? Chris Carmody? We haven't sign the budget with the state yet, because we need to include a budget for the earmark. And that is based off of today
Okay.
and this evening. And, I think it is okay to have a high level number. But before we enter into an agreement with them, we need to have a general understanding over the types of things that this budget is gonna include. But we also will follow up with them with regular reporting and invoices and all of that.
Yeah.
And they even recommend just doing kind of like high level buckets, so if we were to move forward with this, maybe it would even have like 3 categories with the numbers.
Yeah, and I just want to answer your question, John, on so we have for the planning horizon, you folks are well aware of the RFP together. We have the wastewater, which is sort of the brick and mortar wastewater treatment collection system related stuff, which I have a pretty good handle of. And then the other variable is the potential as far as a public works facility over in that area. We've allowed, in order to really have that conversation, because right now it's at 50,000 feet. What are we really talking about? And that's what the allowance is for the conceptual plan, to try and understand so people can make an informed decision. Does it make sense or not? But we need to put something there. Otherwise, it's just opinions that really aren't based on the site specific conditions. And so, and you'll even see the allowance at 45,000. That's where, we're working, Russ Carl says, our facility manager, that is certainly manageable as far as a planning kind of thing. Even if we do an RFP or whatever, we have time to, it's a small scope. But it would allow us by June 30th to truly understand, what are we really talking about? What area? And some of that work that we need to do with the site is knowing that if we're going to take the treatment facility, we need to understand the grounds around it anyway. And when you're talking about inside the wall, we're not suggesting any of these costs to do analysis of, geotech work or quality of the soils or anything inside the wall. This is all in the area that we'd likely be taking and assuming responsibility for. So why not get good information up front? So that's kind of the overview.
Could I ask just a couple of questions to the advisory board, actually? So thank you, Alan. One is, I think the last row, the conceptual plan in concept makes a lot of sense, and I understand what you're saying, Alan. It feels like it is a step or two ahead of the visioning for the entire site, which is, if you're at 50,000 feet, that is at 100,000 feet. And we're trying to get it to 50,000 feet. I think it could then include, should the town consider moving public works and town facilities there? And then you would kind of drill down to say, what specifically, but we're at least a step above that right now, so that it feels a little bit, in my opinion, premature. I think the question that I have for the advisory board is, if we are trying to simplify this, as Megan described, into 2 or 3 buckets to put into the state budget, do we feel comfortable going in with less than half of the allocated funds put towards, I think, really the core focus, of what it was intended for, as I understand it.
Okay, I've got 3 people online that want to ask questions. You hang on to yours. And then we're gonna have to break in about 2 minutes for a public comment that I authorized. Aaron?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I agree with what Patrick was saying. I think it's a little tough to think that of this allocation, we're not going to spend, less than half of it on the planning component and the economic component and all those things. And then my concern is also, when I added up quickly what was flashed on the screen, that's almost as much money on the wastewater component as the planning piece of it. I added up $330,000. So it just seems like, while I appreciate all the work that needs to be done on the wastewater component, does that all have to be done by June 30th? So that would be my comment, that, we're flying at different levels, and I agree with what Patrick was saying.
Yeah, just remind this group that we literally have a response to DCAM late February, about our intent on that facility. So I would argue this treatment facility needs to be at 10,000 feet right now. not
Right.
20 or 50. So
Right.
that's time sensitive. I'd also sort of suggest that, the work that was laid out can be done. I want to make assurance that, through procurement and the technical aspect, these are engineering services, we have a firm in place. My interest is the town of Concord spends whatever money we're gonna spend anyway with the state funds. That was so I'm sort of, will you say, are we front loading wastewater? You bet we are. Why? Because that is the nugget that everything else has to sort of revolve around. So that's sort of my perspective.
Yeah, I would support Alan in that. The wastewater treatment facility is the one thing that's named in the legislation as being offered to us, and it's already been offered. So we're further down the road on that than we should have been. So I would argue that money is the planning that needs to be done anyway. I'll offer a general comment about this budget. We're talking about the FY25 budget. We need to stop thinking about FY25 only. What we need to do is we need to think about this entire project, and it's going to come into FY26, but we don't necessarily have a handle on exactly where those resources are going to be coming from. But as we transition into a budget discussion, we need to be looking at our ask for FY26 and asking the select board, really myself in this case, but when we have this conversation about how are we going to get those funds. And so I'm not particularly, I share Emily's concern that 350 doesn't sound like enough, and June 30th doesn't sound like enough time. So I think we need to, it would be a sort of a waste of everybody's effort to go in trying to sign a contract to be done by June 30th to only pay that limited number of dollars when there's a much bigger job to be done. And I really want to encourage us to focus on the bigger job. And, part of the problem of where's that money coming from, what resources are available. In fact, I made some suggestions in our subgroup and to staff about how we should set up a funding mechanism for FY26, which is designed to capture the costs of this ongoing work, knowing full well that it's going to go into that time and expecting that it needs to be funded. So that if that means a town meeting article to create an appropriation to work this into FY26, we should just go ahead and say that's got to be done.
I do think that we all imagine $725,000 budget would be available primarily for the planning division.
Yeah.
And the related work. Because our schedule is slipping.
Yeah.
We're now in this funny position where we're trying to find ways to take full advantage of the earmark in a way that qualifies, with legislation. But I think that what you're hearing from the committee is some disappointment that we're not able to put the full resources toward that. But the reality is that the way the schedule is working out, we're gonna have a hard time spending that money. So Alan's come with an idea for how we can possibly kind of reprioritize spending, let's say. And there was an indication at some point that there might be other funds that would, because we're funding these out of this bucket, that there might be another bucket that could then potentially fund MCI Concord activities.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to be honest with ourselves. Like, the schedule, we're up against it with the schedule. And by the way, I'm not even that confident that we're gonna have responses by January 27th. It feels like it could easily slip beyond that. So that's gonna exacerbate the problem.
Okay.
So I've got an idea that may be kind of a little compromise here, which is you take the 45,000 from the CPW feasibility conceptual plan, put that up.
Yeah.
We take our budget from 350 to 400. The committee feels we have more resource to get that primary work done. Wastewater treatment can move forward because it is on an accelerated timeline. I get that. Maybe that's one approach.
All right, I want to sit on that. That's a great idea, because I obligated us to carve out some time. I see Kim Frederick is here, and okay, you're in the break room. So Concord Academy asked, I guess they're in the midst of finals. They asked if they could have 5 minutes or so. Some students have some ideas they want to share. So I'm hoping that I can vote on everybody just to give them some audience for a minute, and then we'll come back to the conversation.
Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and especially in the midst of this debate. the students in the class, many of them had to go to exams, but we have 5 students here from the class who have been working on studying MCI project for the past couple of months. And they just have some ideas they really wanted to share with the committee about what they are hoping you will prioritize when you recommend to the select board for zoning. So I'm going to turn it over.
So one of the things, hi, I'm Margaret. One of the things that we were really talking about was affordable housing. And so since there's this opportunity to build new housing on the MCI parcel, we thought that it would be really important to prioritize affordable housing that would provide entry into the Concord's housing market, and also build it and also be integrated kind of with the other non-affordable housing in order to, like, we thought that it would be bad to kind of have it sectioned off. And then in addition, building more ADA compliant housing to support age diversity in Concord.
Is it possible you could move closer to a microphone? It's very difficult to hear.
In fact, bring your chairs right up in front of the camera, that would help.
Sorry, yeah, thanks, sorry. It's.
Okay.
Don't be afraid.
That's
And,
it.
There we go.
Good.
Would you mind saying that again? Sorry.
Margaret. Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. Sorry, here, come right next to the microphone.
Okay. Hi, so one of the things that we've really been talking about as we study Concord and the suburbs in general is we've been talking about how important affordable housing is. And so since there's going to be an opportunity to build new housing on the MCI parcel, we were talking about building more affordable housing along with market rate housing that will be able to provide entry into Concord's housing market. And then in addition, building more ADA compliant housing to support age diversity in Concord.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Sophia. We also talked about having higher density buildings, which we thought could include the possibility of apartment buildings as well.
Could you please repeat that?
Sorry.
Really loud.
Yeah.
Computer down, now, to your face.
Good.
Drop the computer a little bit.
We also talked about having higher density buildings, which included the possibility of perhaps having apartment buildings too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Higher density buildings is what we are.
Higher density.
We also were talking about what kind of buildings or what kind of businesses would be built and what businesses there would be opportunities for. And because Concord already has a lot of small businesses, we thought it would be good to continue that and build area for small businesses that could support both the economics and the community of the community that will be built on the MCI parcel, most likely, instead of building like large box stores that would take away from the community.
I'm Jacob. We discussed possibly having underground parking because it avoids too much asphalt space. And it could also be good in terms of like paying for itself because it will condense space and allow businesses to profit above it.
I'm Zhenya. We kind of building on everything that was said previously, we considered the possibility for mixed use development because the combination of businesses and residential development builds kind of a good interconnected town. This also builds into the question of apartment buildings because with more development, there is more opportunity for variety.
Hi, I'm Lila. We also talked about incorporating the natural environment and natural resources that can be used recreationally, like the Aspat River, the rail trail, or Warner's Pond.
We have two more. Yeah.
So another thing that we wanted to mention was we wanted the new development to be bike friendly. We wanted to connect the Bruce Freeman and Reformatory branch bike paths to build a bike friendly infrastructure in the area.
And then lastly, we thought it would be fun if we added a big green space that would be there for the entire community on the MCI parcel.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate that and good luck with your finals.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to let the students present what they came up with.
By the way, one more comment if I may. So I'm the chair of the community outreach subcommittee, and we most definitely would like to get more input from students. So maybe in the new year, we could arrange a time to actually have an in-person meeting to kind of hear a little more depth on some of these ideas, because they're all good ideas.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking time and interrupting your lively debate.
So you can reach me through the MCI Concord email address. Shannon will forward the message to me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Elizabeth.
Hi, okay. So back to the budget, it's very unclear to me how detailed we need to get in this. And if we don't need to get that detailed, I think we should not get that detailed. And there was also talk, I also agree, we're getting forced into a position that is by none of our design where we're losing time. And I would encourage us to keep pushing. I mean, I guess Dan and Patrick, I would encourage you guys to keep pushing the town. The fact that this hasn't gone anywhere, that this RFP hasn't been brought to procurement is kind of amazing to me. So I'm just, whatever I can do to help, but I hate to come back here in a month or whenever we're coming back, 2 weeks, and find out nothing else has been done. We also have talked about using, now that we're in this position where we don't have a lot of time, we talked about putting things we'd already paid for on this budget, and that the state was okay with us doing that. Has there been any thought about that, where that would slot in here? And I guess my overall thing would be just, do we have to be this detailed? Is that going to be what, determines whether we get this money or not?
Thank you.
I
can help with that. Some of the money that's been spent already, and this is important for the group to understand. Again, only a third of the town is sewered. So the ratepayers really we're protecting, they're not here for economic growth development, they're here to get sewer service. But the facility assessment was done using those funds. So it'd be nice if we could reimburse, some of our funds that have been spent through the ratepayer, through the SIF actually, which is sort of important. And then the other thing is, because of this work that identified on the wastewater side, it is nice that it's not the general fund who has to contribute or the ratepayer has to contribute, it's the state doing some of this foundational work. That's also the value of using the state money for the wastewater. So that's an example, Elizabeth, of some funds that have already been expended, they're directly relating to MCI.
And Megan, did you?
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the level of detail, Elizabeth. I don't, what I was hoping to have today is a discussion and understanding of the advisory board's intent on the line item related to the planning. So the other pieces, I think, what we've identified here and don't need to be in kind of granular detail in the state contract. But the kind of question before you all was that first piece, and there's been some discussion about it, but be curious to hear where you end up.
I'd be happy to make a motion to increase the planning component funds to $400,000 as John has.
Can I ask you just to hang on to that for a second? Only because I see Linda has her hand up. And Lee?
Yes, thanks. I guess when I looked at this, I thought it looked imbalanced. It looks like already a great deal of decision making must have gone into this budget, and it's focused on again, what I think it looks premature in terms of the emphasis totally on wastewater treatment. I sort of view the assets we have in two areas. One is clearly in the wastewater area, and yes, the select board, I agree with, really needs to address this, but there's nothing here that addresses other assets in terms of supporting them. And again, I would ask if we could consider something in terms of the historical elements of the site. I think that if we just, kind of keep pushing that down the road, that we don't have any assets and planning for looking at, any any sort of archival work, archaeological work, cultural work, and it would seem to me if we perhaps put a modest amount to begin some planning in that area, that would be notable in terms of saying, no, all the decisions haven't been made at this early stage by the town.
More comment response to that, you prompted my thought, Linda. When we reviewed this as a community outreach committee, we were, one of the ideas that we're working on is putting together a video tour of the site that will be available online so that the community can see what's really behind those walls. That's an example of something that it's not going to be enormously expensive, but there will be a cost to that, right? So it would be good to have a pool of monies that would be available for things like that are not going to be handled by the primary consultant, but that will be valuable. And I think that it's, you know, the historical assessment it falls kind of in the same category where maybe we should think about, as you make your motion, Peter, setting aside a certain amount of money for things like that are not identified yet, but we know they're going to come off. And maybe you call it the contingency.
John, I thought Millionaire Media was gonna do that video, so I didn't think that there was going to be a cost associated with it.
Ideally, they will, but again,
Yeah.
there will be other little things like that come up.
Yeah. We have a meeting scheduled with Millionaire Media on Wednesday that I hope will also be able to attend. And so hopefully they will be able to do the video, and I think also DOC offered to do the drum portion of it.
Okay. Mark?
So I was just gonna make the comment that I think that large bucket for planning doesn't necessarily have to be completely spent on the consultant. So we can look at that as one of those several categories. So we're planning for wastewater treatment, which I would say is money that we have spent and would have spent no matter what. So it's good that we've got a funding source for that. And then planning in the planning bucket is another bucket. We'll put out the RFP. It's just, we don't limit the RFP to just, you know, 350 or 400, but let those bids come back. And with an expectation that we'll find a way to plan what happens after July 1st. According to the real numbers when they come back for against the scope of work that we really want to see done. So I support the idea of, yes, there's other things that we may spend it on besides the consultant directly. But I think that the historical piece that Linda was mentioning, I kind of put that inside of that RFP's scope rather than outside. So I thought that it was covered there, and it's just not as advanced as the wastewater report is at the moment.
That's a good question. So conceptually, if, let's say, 300 gets allocated towards wastewater, which leaves us with, 400 for planning, and then the bids come back and, by far the best proposal is 600,000. What happens then? Are they disqualified because we don't have the funds? Or can we go back to the select board and ask for an additional 200? How much are we tying our hands here?
Well, I think we'd want to be as accommodating as possible. I think the only hang up to making sure the planning team has what they need to do this work, this is the critical piece. The only reason I wouldn't say, of course, is just because I believe we're gonna be entering into this wastewater contract work. Once we have an understanding of the budget, so I mean, I don't know, Alan, if you have, some of these things are gonna take a little time, so as soon as we have.
My experience, I'm just sorry to say, is Concord, our projects work at glacial paces. This is gonna be remarkable, and I will tip my cap to this group if you can accelerate it. I'm concerned, and I know what the work needs to be done, and I have a consultant ready to do it. I'm concerned about June 30th. So it's just my experience. So the sooner we get the green light, the sooner I'm going to task my consultants to get moving on that work. So I don't want to, there's always risk of just the delay, and my concern is if we don't spend that money for things that we're gonna spend anyway, then again, when we're gonna spend the money on the wastewater, it's gonna come from the general fund, so we're gonna have to ask for it. And just so this group understands in context, I've already putting the trial balloon on a borrowing authorization of possibly $20 million for wastewater for the treatment facility. And that we have to entertain sooner rather than later, because if we take that treatment facility over within the next year, it has emergency needs. It's on, duct tape in some areas right now, not the whole 20 million. But we're identifying, if we're gonna take it, we know we're gonna spend 20 million over the next 10 years. We have to figure out who's gonna fund it. And I say it's gonna be a combination of new users, the state. And that's really who's gonna be, but the town will be the funding agent, right? That's how we do it. We'll borrow, but, so these are the schedules that I'm looking at, but I just wanna put that out there.
It's really
if
helpful.
That's helpful.
Definitely.
Can I just ask as a
Yeah.
matter of process though?
Yeah.
If you, and the select board in this case, in my theoretical, agreed that the $600,000 option was the best. Is there a mechanism to bridge that funding gap, which I'm not saying that we take it away from wastewater theoretically. But we would need another 200 in this case. Is there a mechanism for that, or is the answer we're out of funds and we need to go? I can envision some mechanisms that might solve that problem. Okay.
Lee,
Thank you. I don't think anyone on this board or elsewhere should assume that by virtue of the planning study that we're about to put out is gonna get us to a point where we're ready to recommend zoning to the town. I think we're gonna be well into next year and another whole nother study. So from a timing perspective, that should be kept in mind. I personally think that the wastewater determination is the most important thing for not just this 51 acres, but for the entire town, for the future of development for the entire town. At the same time, I don't think they should be grabbing, all our money out of this budget. And as Mark suggested, perhaps there's other buckets available within the town's budget funds to spend that, but don't underestimate the importance of that, please.
good point. Linda, and then I'm gonna come back to Peter.
So I understand that the town will have expenses here and the sewer department will have expenses as well. And I looked up and it seems to me that the fund balance for the sewer fund is over, last I saw for fiscal 24 was over $7 million. So I'm not sure why, if the work has to go forward, we need to rely so heavily on the funds for MCI Concord.
Sure, so. 28 years, why do we have so much money in our reserve with our enterprise? The reason is we anticipate expenditures. Right now, I'm expecting $9 to $10 million of improvements at our existing wastewater treatment plant within the next 5 years. So it's there not by accident, by design, through rates that are fairly high and sewer improvement fees that are collected for that. So that money does have a use, and we've already defined it, and that is to replace, repair our existing treatment facility to maintain the existing capacity, which has no allowance for any more growth. So that's sort of the answer.
Okay, Peter,
So I'm gonna recommend that we put 400,000 for planning plus a 10% contingency for other items such as the historic preservation or things that might come up, and we reserve the balance for Alan and let him sort of, you had some contingencies baked into your number, so hopefully that would give you sufficient to move your project forward for the town. So that's the proposal on.
Yeah, and I agree with John. I think that conceptual study of the DPW facility should be weaved into the land use planner, brought that in. Because that is, as you said, I mean, we can look at historical, we can look at all these, this is all gonna be vetted out by the planner.
Right.
And the planner might decide, like, you need, you need so many acres of developable land to make this project work with the demolition and all that, so it might. Those studies are gonna come out in this course of this discussion. And if we start narrowing it, like this is all gonna come out, and then we can have studies after that.
And again, I just want to reiterate what Linda made, you know, we don't want to be taking decision-making power away from the community in terms of their vision for the site. And so let's pull that item and have that be the source of funds.
Okay, I would entertain a second if that's, because you do want to vote, Megan, right? You said.
I think it'd be helpful to have a vote on the,
All right, so what's on table, as I understand it, is Peter suggesting shifting the budget for the planning up to $400,000, and in addition, adding a 10% contingency, which I did my math right, it'd be $440,000 for that one.
Second.
All those in favor need to do a roll call, I think. Mark?
Aye.
Patty?
Where are you taking that money from? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I'm not sure yet. I think staff is gonna have to regroup. We're asking for your recommendation on the planning
I
component.
think the idea is
and we'll have to-
preserving 440 for planning.
Yeah.
And then whatever the balance is, staff figures out how best to optimize the use of those
When
funds.
you took the CPW allowance and rolled it into.
I rolled it in.
part of it, which
Yeah.
is great, you know, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
all part of
yeah,
the
right.
plan. We're
And it just-
planning.
yeah.
So I think, Elizabeth, it gets to your point about not getting too detailed on the town stuff.
Yeah, so effectively you have to find 45,000 out of the wastewater, the 5 or 6 lines.
And I even have some thoughts about.
Okay.
So tonight, when you present this, you're just presenting the 440 and then,
Correct, and then Megan's gonna present her piece of it. So we, as the AV, are just gonna-
725, right?
Yeah, just a second. So wait a minute, I just want,
That's good.
did you want to say something? I just want to finish the vote. Thank you.
Okay, before you finish the vote, just to clarify for Patrick, I think what he's saying is the consultant line becomes 400. The, we'll call it contingency for other stuff that the committee would direct is 40.
Yeah.
And then whatever the balance is between that and 725 is up to town staff to figure out how to allocate, with the priority being on wastewater treatment clearly, right?
Agreed.
So notionally, the 45 that was in the last line will be rolled into the planning effort, because that way everything gets planned for at the same time.
So, just for further clarification, we're taking the money from the conceptual plan for the DPW site and we're moving that up. I don't want us to be saying we're gonna do a DPW conceptual plan as part of, that can be part of the greater discussion that the community generates.
Yes.
If it wasn't, I would personally be disappointed.
And it could be as simple as, will it fit and how much space will it take?
Yeah.
Right,
That's
and
it.
it
Does
is,
the town want?
well, yeah, right, and
Next, that's the next question.
And is the wastewater treatment plant a good neighbor for certain uses? You know,
So-
those kind of. Mark,
Mark,
So
can I
I'm
ask you-
gonna warn us against target fixation on 725. This would not be the first committee that showed up with a budget that wasn't completely funded when they presented something to the select board. So if we wanna say the number is 765, just so that we don't have to send staff back spinning over a few $1,000s and say there's a $40,000 gap, then that's fine at this stage of the game. We've got real work to do here, and I think that we're spending way too much time being fixated on the amount of money that the state is willing to come up with, when, there's some ARPA funds that have not been completely allocated. There's an opportunity to appropriate those for something before the end of the year. There are decisions that could be made that could solve these types of gaps quite easily, and I would just encourage us to focus on what's the best way to get the actual work done here.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, that's a good point.
So our number should be based on our
On what
study.
we think it's gonna take to actually do the work,
Okay.
not
And
what,
the
not
town can
fitting into
figure out the
some
rest.
bucket that's been named for us arbitrarily down in Boston.
But it's also a circular problem because we haven't gotten the RFPs back, so
Right, we don't know. Right, and we also, but I think what every one of us has acknowledged one way or the other is this work is gonna take beyond June 30th to get done. And some of it, and as Alan was pointing out, the cost and the billings and everything is gonna shift into next year one way or the other. And we'll need to develop a mechanism to solve that, so that we don't have this hurry up and wait problem every single fiscal year. This is gonna be a multi-fiscal year project, we should budget that way as soon as possible.
And the RFP is structured in such a way that we're asking for what their estimate for the zoning component will be. We basically put 100,000 aside for that. And I see Elizabeth with her hands up.
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify, so we've gone from saying that we're not sure 350 is enough to saying, okay, let's make it 440. Aaron and some other people have said they're not sure, even if, I don't know, Aaron, I'm putting words in your mouth, though. We just don't know what that number is. So now what our last proposal seems to me is that we're gonna say 440,000 and then 285,000, we're just gonna let town staff decide about without us having a say in it. Is that where we are? And are we comfortable with that? And that then does preclude us from being able to reach that. I understand the points about wastewater needing some money here, but I think Linda, you also raised some good points about, you know, how deep we're getting into that. Alan, I've heard what you're saying about your concerns. I guess that's the point. It's 285,000 we're giving up control of, and we're just gonna give that to the town staff. That's what's on the table.
I'm not sure that's the way to characterize that, but I think that is the
Okay.
fact we're saying. I want to second what the point that Lee made. Wastewater is really important. In the business community, we know it's been a huge obstacle to all kinds of things happening. You hear about the sewer improvement fee. It's a tough nut. We've had a hard time cracking. This is a great opportunity. We got to do this work at some point, and if Alan is ready to drive that work now, let's get it done.
I guess my only question would be, to come back to Mark, do you think we have adequate amount of money? I think, should we push the 725 based on your what you just described?
I think if we think we really have expectations that we're going to be able to utilize this money before in the FY25 timeframe, then we should raise the number. If we don't think so, or we're not sure, we can come back. This is our best information as we sit here now in December. We get another crack at it as we come forward and get some of the information back here. So I would discourage us from spending too much time trying to slice this, you know, too closely.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to make the adjustments that we said. We had a second from Lee. We had gone around the table, and everyone in the room had voted in favor. Aaron and Linda.
Do you want me to vote, or can I make my comment?
If it's important, if you think it's important for us to hear your comment, by all means, make your comment.
I guess I would just advocate that we have the 440 for planning, and we say the remainder is for wastewater treatment. Let's not just leave it to decision of the town.
Okay.
And I would vote yes for that.
Okay, thank you. And Linda? Sorry.
I would just like assurances that independent of whatever our final plan comes to be in terms of our visioning and planning scenario, that that would not affect all of these wastewater programs that are going to be done. That is, if we decide that we're going to have 2,000 units of housing put up, that all of this would still be necessary work versus if we decided, to have a much more open space or whatever in the land. That is, is this a independent of any future planning decisions that the community could make?
That is my understanding, but Alan, do you want to?
Yeah, just to go to John's point, the town has had a crisis of wastewater capacity. This is the only real viable alternative. So I think if we do our planning for this site, we need to understand there's got to be additional allowance outside of this campus, or it doesn't really work. It's not in our interest to be the funding agent or the financing agent for private development or whatever might happen. We're always gonna have that crisis until we get a relief valve for additional capacity. And I've told you, we'd be very fortunate as a community to have 2 different treatment facilities. Because again, the operation of that is not 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 1 is a little more than that, because we get to start managing our wastewater. And people who are in the industry who've been going to communities without wastewater or drinking water realize it's a legitimate cap on economic growth development.
That is only 300 gallon capacity, right?
310,000.
Alright, so just from my experience, that site at MCI is gonna use the lion's share of that, cause I just did this in Littleton, when I was with Littleton and we did the IBM site. The treatment facility that was there, or that the town was building, was about 225,000 gallons, and I know you're familiar with that area, is earmarked just for 550 King Street, and that's 26 acres, so there's not gonna be this big, a lot of extra capacity, in my experience, for wastewater. You're gonna be using, if you're talking 2,000 units, mixed use, that's gonna be what you're gonna need to support that site.
And this is why we have in the planning, the ability to, if you saw with Weston and Sampson sort of weighing in, we've already started some concepts of what density are we looking at?
And what type of.
And so, and we do see that the town could likely realize the density it wants with mixed use and have excess capacity. We're going, but this is all part of, if we don't start drilling into this, we never get to the point of any real good conversation, so.
All right, Aaron and then Linda.
Oh, good.
Okay.
We get votes.
We didn't get a vote from Emily and we didn't get a vote.
some motion.
Oh, yeah, but we want, thank you. Lee is going to amend the motion. Right, if you can.
Aaron, help me out, but it was 440, moved to, budget 440 towards the planning study. And the remainder to, specifically to wastewater treatment study.
I mean, the wastewater stuff added up to 330, I believe. So for Mark's comment, we could just keep it at 330 and go in at 770 and we'd be over the budget that we've been allocated, but maybe we need to consider other funding sources.
You got ideas from Mark, so.
For the budget that I'm submitting to the state for the earmark, I'm gonna propose a budget that meets.
Meets the 725.
Yeah.
Let's stay.
That's fair.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, and Linda, did you, sorry.
440 and the balance.
440 balance.
285.
285. Linda, did you want to make a comment?
And does this budget reflect backward looking expenses of the town, or those would not be reimbursed? Or are those expenses implicitly in these numbers?
Okay, so I heard, and people can correct me if I heard wrong, I heard that it does include some backward expenses related to.
That's correct.
Okay, and then I haven't heard from Megan lately. I know that at one point we were thinking about trying to capture some of the money that she's been spending with various, no.
Yeah, I moved away from that.
Okay, all right, we moved away from that. So it's just strictly related to the wastewater.
So the 440 would not include any back expenses, but the 285 would.
Correct.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right, Lee, did you finish making your, okay, so I think the only people I haven't heard from is Emily and Elizabeth, but correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, there's no second on my motion.
Oh, second by Peter, so do we need to go around the table again?
Parliamentarian here.
Yeah, we're gonna go around the table one more time, because following policy. Mark,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
John, Peter, Lee.
Yes.
Dan, yes, Aaron,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
rock and roll. Thank you, everybody.
You didn't get Linda.
Sorry, Linda.
Yes.
Not intentionally, thank you. And you brought us home. All right, so here's the deal. We were supposed to touch base on preparation for the planning consultant, but given the little bit of breathing room that you created for our Anthony, I think I'm gonna hold off on that because I suspect, given what we talked about, there might be some public comment. And what I would say is we are going to visit that issue, but I'm thinking maybe it starts in the planning subcommittee and we can bring recommendations to the full board. Understanding what I said to John as a sort of big idea, that we would have representation at least at one, unless people feel differently. Okay, are there people in the?
I do.
Sorry, Mary.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this. We're happy to bring this to the select board tonight when you voted on here. I wanted to alert you to the fact that tonight at the select board meeting, Megan is going to be presenting something that we call the land use matrix, which is a tool and process that we're going to be using in town to match our current needs, the land that's available, including MCI, including 2229 Main, including Peabody, including other sites. So it's a way to get our hand or our arms around what are all the needs we have in town for public works, for public safety, for housing, for commercial development, maybe for recreation. And then what are all of the parcels available and matching those together and seeing what makes sense and what doesn't. So how does that relate to this board? You're going to be giving us information as far as what you have available at MCI and what you're learning from the community. And we're going to be bringing back to you the recommendations that we hear from our efforts as far as what the community would like in these different areas. Great. So it starts tonight. Well, Megan's just going to give us a drive-through tonight, and then we're going to appoint a small working group, and hopefully we'll work together closely. So we're going to be looking bigger than just MCI. Just the point I want to make.
That's gonna happen in the portion of the meeting that's dedicated to the joint meeting with the school committee between 6 and 7.
Yes.
Do we, sorry,
It'll be about 6:45.
do we know approximately when do you want Patrick and I present?
That would be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
And
Yeah.
do you know when approximately or?
It's right.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, that's right. What is that?
Around 6:45.
Okay, sorry.
6:45. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I didn't just travel 23 hours. Okay, is there anyone else on Zoom that would like, I can't see everybody, I can see Linda front and center. And we will not forget you in the vote.
There's none.
Okay,
I have a couple of points before we adjourn.
awesome, thank you. Chuck.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready for you.
Okay, so on community outreach, I'm not gonna give an update of our whole last meeting, but just a few points. One is, I did have a meeting last week with the school department, the superintendent, and 3 school committee chairs. So that was really good. Basically shared with them all the same information, actually the same presentation we shared with Leland voters. They appreciated it. There are 5 other organizations on our stakeholder list that were named in the legislation, and that we had suggested that Legal and Government Affairs would be the primary contact with. Those were the Concord Housing Development Corporation, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, District Council Chair of the ULI Boston, Concord Business Partnership, and ORS. If you haven't already, I would suggest that you make that outreach. Happy to provide like a slide deck that has all the stuff you can share. And community outreach is happy to be part of that if necessary. But I think, given that this is taking a little longer, we want to be sure that those people have proactively heard from us. One of those groups, the Concord Business Partnership, has invited us to come on February 5th to present at their meeting that morning. My plan would be to do the exact same information we've shared with the others, but I'm just saying to, legal and government affairs folks, if you'd like to reach out to your people, that would be really good.
Excuse me, has the letter that was prepared, has that gone to these?
Yes, yeah, that's gone. And then the last thing, I meant to talk to this beforehand, Patrick, but we have 4 members on our committee, on our subcommittee, and that means to have a quorum, we need 3. Getting 3 is sometimes harder than 2. So we were looking for creative ways to, shall I say, reduce the size of the committee. And given that you are a co-chair of the advisory board, we'd love to have you continue to participate, but we wanted to suggest that if you wanted to formally step off the subcommittee, still come to all of our meetings, of course, then we'd be able to have quorums more easily.
You are full of great suggestions. John.
Do you mind being the
You want to just keep going?
I would
Is
just
that-
offer that I'm on 2 subcommittees, so I would offer to also officially step off if needed, but I'll let Patrick go first.
In all seriousness, the fact that he's is an advisory board co-chair means he's almost there kind of ex officio, so we love to have him. But, so I wanted to then ask, what do we need to do to formally remove Patrick if he is so willing?
I don't know the answer, other than maybe it's like.
Patrick can send an email and
Okay.
that suffices as a resignation from this.
Okay, official.
Inbound.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you guys for,
I'll
thank
help you
you.
find your way to spend that time.
Thanks,
And then, so while we're doing this, Lee, do you, or Elizabeth, do you have any updates that you want to share?
I'm just waiting to hear back from Chris Carmody that we got everyone's comments in on our outreach letters, and then John, point taken, we can reach out to those groups you just mentioned among the other groups listed in our spreadsheet, and also waiting to get the finalized MassDOT letter out, but should be done soon.
Awesome, great, thank you for that. So it's, and then Peter, do you have anything to look at?
We've been spending all our time writing up the request for proposal.
Why are you taking so long to get your
Well, we decided to sort of model the town and move with glacial swiftness.
Oh, okay.
He's been consuming too many candy canes. So I think we're scheduled to meet on Tuesday, I believe, so we can start the conversation about the process and.
As in tomorrow or next Tuesday?
Is it next?
Yeah, it can't be tomorrow, but next Tuesday is Christmas Eve.
So we probably won't be meeting.
I mean, you could try to move your meeting to a different day,
What do you think, Peter?
but
If you wanna think about it?
Why don't we look at Monday at 2 o'clock on the 23rd?
Okay. I'm good. All right, so.
When is this board meeting next?
I don't know that we have a meeting scheduled, and the ones that I do are always on the wrong alternating day, it's weekend.
Were we gonna shift to once a month in
We
January?
were, assuming once we got the RFP out and person on board, we may be ready to do that. Why don't we go over to early January?
it would be January 6th and January 20th would be the advisory board meetings.
Okay,
Say that again?
January 20th.
January 6th and,
Is a holiday.
so January 6th and either the 13th or the 27th, probably the 27th.
27th, yes. That's almost like, to John's point, that's almost like one in a month.
Yeah.
Close.
I will send calendar invites out. You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, that would be going from 3 week gaps between this meeting and the next one and the following.
Yeah.
That would be slowing the pace.
Yeah.
I would accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right,